Hello and welcome to From Good Law to Great Law, Leadership and Innovation and Law 2023. Thank you for joining us for our webinar. We're so thankful that you can join us for our presentation. We know you're busy, so we appreciate you carving out an hour to be with us, and we promise to deliver a valuable discussion. My name is Rachel Klepp-Miller. I work on the digital engagement team at GrowthPlay. I'll turn it over to our esteemed presenters in just a minute, but first a couple of things before we get started. We're going to run through this content in less than an hour. We respect your time, and we want this webinar to be as interactive as possible, so please ask questions as we go. You can use the question panel on your screen and go to webinar. If we can't answer them all live, we will follow up with you directly after the webinar. Please also keep an eye out for our live polling questions. And finally, we will send you a recording of the webinar. We're recording right now, and we'll also send you the slides in the next few days so you can use them internally with your team. Please make sure you watch your email for those. Our presenters today are some of the best in the business, and I know many of you know them well. Deb Knupp, Managing Director of GrowthPlay and the co-founder of Akina. She has 25 years of experience coaching leaders to create cultures based on accountability, integrity, and authentic relationships. Also joining us is Deborah Baker, Managing Director at GrowthPlay and founder of Law Leaders Lab. Deborah has 20 years of legal market experience, helping lawyers really rethink the way that they create, deliver, and communicate value to clients. We are fortunate to have both of you here. Welcome, ladies.
Thanks, Rachel. Great. Well, welcome everyone on the call. Deb and I are so excited to be here, but particularly from the overwhelming response that we had to today's topic. We had close to 200 people register for our event today, and it just strikes us as so reaffirming of this concept of leadership and innovation and how important it is to the practice of law. As Rachel said, we're going to move through things really quick today, but our goal is really to talk about innovation from the concept not of it as a thing or even as a process, but really as a journey to create something that's different and better than some of the ways that we've been kind of dealing with the legal profession lately. And that's like sometimes we're in this mode where we're really coming at the practice of law, where we're hearing all of these negative headlines, where we're hearing just this frustration both with the way that our businesses are working for us personally as lawyers and as professionals, but also we're hearing some negativity. There's this perception in the marketplace of us. And as we talk about what innovation really means at its core, what we're really getting to is how can we create a place that's really something different and better than where we are. The point of view we're going to share today, and as we talk about this discussion of leadership innovation, is from this concept of what would it take to create great law. And we're going to actually introduce you to a movement called Great Law and share with you the firms that have taken on this challenge, some of the things that they're doing to get it right. We're then going to back up and we're going to talk about some of the underlying principles that are going into the Great Law movement and really the foundation of what it is, what innovation is. And then for the second half, we're going to get really practical. We are going to talk about how we can take these conversations, no matter where you are in the innovation journey, some practical things you can leave here with today to advance conversations inside your firm. So what we've learned from our experience is that typically everyone comes to this journey from a different place, and we are anticipating that on the call today is that we're going to be talking, we've got some people on the call today that are already doing fantastic things. And for those of you who are part of the Great Law movement, that you've been leaders and path makers in what's going on, we hope today that we can reinforce and maybe provide you with some things that would be additive to what you are doing. At the other end of the spectrum, there may be people on this call today that this is an entirely new concept to you. So as we go into this, we want to provide you with some of the fundamentals and some of the things that some real foundational principles you could take with you to start educating your teams internally. And then there's probably a whole bunch of people on this call today that are somewhere in the middle. And so if you are looking for ways to keep your teams motivated or to continue motivating people, or even if you've had some success but you might have gotten stuck along the way because this journey is a long one, and if you found yourself maybe in that, what I like to call the valley of despair, we hope to leave you with some things that can maybe help you get unstuck, to really share with you some quick wins and some ways to restart the engine and keep the and recalibrate some of the things you've already started. To that end, what we're going to start today is with a quick poll, and to really understand where folks are in this journey. And so what we want to ask you this morning is, when you hear the word, when the word innovation is mentioned inside your firm, what's the most common response you get from your attorneys? Is it that, wow, that sounds really awesome, let's dive in and do it, tell me more? Is it more middle of the road, where that sounds interesting, but I'm not sure that's something that's for us? Or is it, I'd love to know more, but I don't even know what that means? Is it that innovation is a buzzword and it's just the latest, the latest craze out there and it's a waste of time and energy? Or is it complete oblivion, which is, what does that even have to do with the practice of law? So we'd love to just get a sense of the folks that we have on the call today.
Great, and for those of you watching, just go ahead and click the answer that most applies to you, and we'll go ahead and close the poll and take a look at the results.
So, Deborah Baker, this is an interesting thing, is that a large majority of you appear to be coalescing around this idea of people wanting to know more, but not knowing where to start. And as you set the foundation for today's discussion, that is exactly what we endeavor to do, is to give you a sense of how to narrate and discuss what it means to have innovation in a law firm, and in many cases to give people a sense of confidence that getting started doesn't require a lot of time, a lot of money, or a lot of shiny things. So it'll be exciting to see where we can take this and how folks can feel more energized to learn more and to have a real sense of a starting point.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, great. So let's start this conversation by really thinking about not just the what and the how of innovation, but let's really talk about the why of it. Because at the end of the day, if we're diving into something that's particularly that's different, we want to know what is the potential out there. And this idea of great law is really this concept of bringing the idea of what if to the marketplace. What if we could create a place where the best and the most profitable clients want to do business, where we get to come to work and practice law with people, with attorneys and professionals and other people that we like to do business with. We spend a lot of time at work. Don't we want to really enjoy the people that we work with? And what if, at the end of the day, we really have this potential to leave the world a better place, that we can, whether it's through taking the proceeds of our really fantastic businesses and putting them toward causes that are important to us, whether it's in the actual work we're doing, we have an opportunity to make a difference, or whether in the way that we work together, we're able to strengthen and enhance our communities. And this idea that we could really do something bigger and better and more enjoyable, to me, is the whole reason that we would want to innovate in the first place. The way we think about that, and as you think about, okay, what does that really mean? I think about it from the perspective of the way that we've traditionally measured what it means to be a successful law firm, and we've done that basically looking at bottom line revenues, right? We either look at what are our revenues, or what's the profit per partner, and that single line measurement is really quite limiting. So what we're opening the door to you today is, what if we change the way we measure success and really look at triple line performance metrics? And this is not a term that we invented. It's actually something that comes from the sustainability industry, but we really like it because it's a way of really thinking about what's the there. If we don't want to just be good, we actually want to be great, we need to put some stickiness around it.
One of my favorite things about a triple bottom line is that the idea is that there's 3 avenues to be profitable. And when we introduce this to our law firm clients, very often people begin to respond really favorably, because the practical reality is profit, people, and planet are present in any enterprise of business, including law firms. And so the idea that we can have an expanded view of a triple bottom line, not a single bottom line, it really creates that sense that, wow, there's so much more in front of us that has possibility and isn't so linear, so diminished by having a more limited view.
Yeah, I think that that's right. And what I've seen in many firms, we're working with just fantastic lawyers, but what we're seeing is there's a lot of fatigue out there. You know, we work really hard, and what it takes to be successful as a lawyer is hard work. And when you start hearing things like the demise of the billable hour, this lack of sustainability in your business model, that artificial intelligence and computers are going to take over the practice of law, it makes us feel small, and it really puts us in this place of scarcity versus looking at how can we turn that around into something that, in looking at it from a perspective of abundance. And this idea of, you know, we can play not to win and just try to do something that's going to get us through the day. If we could open the door and say, you know what, while we're here, let's just put it all out on the table and let's take this journey and play to win. And when we start looking at that from coming at a place of possibility rather than a place of pain, where we get to work together instead of closing the door and working in silos, and we get to actually sell the value we deliver versus the how hard we're working, that's where great law really has the opportunity to thrive. And to me, what's exciting about this is, one, we're seeing it happen, and two, that ultimate, this is not to say we've got profit right in here at the top of, at the top of it, that the firms that are doing it right, and all of the evidence is suggesting that the more we embrace these concepts, the profits flow from that, and we're creating more sticky, loyal relationships with the right types of clients. So to me, that, as we look at the great law, or as we start thinking about leadership and innovation, that's what's so important. And the reason we're tying leadership into this conversation today is that no matter what we do around our practice, that we can have the best people, the best processes, and the best technology out there, but if we don't have really great leaders, like many of you on this call, we're not going to be successful, and we're not going to be able to drive the change that we want to see.
So as we begin to think about leadership, we're going to transition to a little bit of the backstory. And so much of this began on a journey back in 2012 where we were focusing on an innovation study, which was very much geared to the future of great law. Now, some of you may have had an opportunity to see the genesis of great law through Law 2023, but essentially this was a 15-month think tank. It was a study that included a variety of leaders and people who all come from different parts of the legal ecosystem. At the core of the Law 2023 initiative was this principle of design thinking. Now, in addition to triple bottom line, we want to make sure that everyone leaves this call with a great awareness of this construct of design thinking. Design thinking is this idea of a human-centered approach to innovation and R&D, and it requires an outside-in look where you look to the future in creating what would be true or what would be the best of the future, and then design backwards what would you need to do today to realize the full potential of the future. So again, triple bottom line and design thinking are two major fields of study which are having a huge impact on the innovation work of successful firms. So through this think tank and through this study, we did an activity called future casting, whereby we interviewed people of expertise. We talked to designers, to technologists, to academics, to people who study gender, to people who studied the demographics, people who look at global change, finances. We interviewed a bunch of people from a futurist point of view and said, what's going to be true about the marketplace in the year 2023? And based on the findings and their declarations of what was going to be true in the market, we then took those key principles and did an activity called backcasting, which said, what would we design today, recognizing the future 10 years out? Out of that study came 7 specific design principles. And these design principles were rooted in how do we begin to think about our innovation journey today to get a jump start on the future of law, and how do we do it in a way which is very human-centered, client-centered, and other-centered. Well, as Paul Harvey would say, what's the rest of the story? Did Law 2023 get it right? Well, I'm pleased to report that we absolutely got it right. And as you begin to think about your innovation journey, I'm going to ask you to examine where might these design principles already be in play. To that end, if you're asking yourself, where do we begin or start? For many people, starting the innovation conversation around these 7 principles awaken the sense of interest and awareness for your lawyers and other influencer decision makers in your firms, such that you can begin to advance the ball. So at a real high level review, let's look at the principles. First, one of the core design thinking principles was this realization that technology was inevitably going to have a major impact on law, but the question becomes, how does it become an enabler of premium billing? So as you begin to think about how many wise firms are beginning to invest in the utility of technology to focus on the things that may have been more commoditized or more mundane, the most successful firms from an innovation perspective are recognizing that technology is not the enemy, but rather it's an enabler that allows lawyers then to communicate and to consult where the premium billing is available. There are a number of firms who have launched technologies that allow clients more self-service access, so that when a client places a call to that outside counsel, they're a more educated user, and the thoughtfulness and the strategic nature of how lawyers consult is increasing at a high premium rate. Second principle is this recognition that offerings in the future would need to transcend the traditional boundaries of jurisdiction. Now, this is not to suggest that jurisdiction is not going to be important in the year 2023. It is, though, a realization that lawyers and law firms would have to begin thinking about the services, the products, the interventions that they put in the world, and how that begins to transcend jurisdictions. Many of you are already members of consortiums and groups that come together to provide legal services across multiple countries and multiple jurisdictions. So at a very basic level, these offerings allow you to consult with your clients even when you don't have a local office. Beyond that, we're also seeing, again, how technology allows a level of communication, a level of oversight, a level of management around insurance, risk, currencies. So you begin to see the cohesive nature of providing a legal service, but doing it in a way that isn't rooted in local market or a local currency. All right, a third principle is this idea that in the year 2023, we would absolutely be in the threshold of needing to have institutions that realize that they are bigger than their profits. As we've already highlighted to you, the triple bottom line metrics became core to the study of Law 2023, and we've already begun to see a number of progressive and innovative firms are realizing we have to transcend the traditions of profits per partner. Fourth is the principle of this recognition of talent. Now, that's probably not a surprise to anyone on this call. You know, as we've got 4 years of data under our belt, one of the hottest conversations in innovation is how are we maximizing and really enabling our talent to do new things. But what the principle suggests is that law firms must embrace that there are a number of new pathways to practice and the inclusion of a lot of non-traditional roles. Think about your own firms or your own experiences where you're beginning to see designers, project managers, pricing specialists. We're seeing consulting arms. We're seeing people that bring design thinking expertise. So again, we're seeing more and more law firms recognize that the tradition of associate to income partner and income partner to share partner, that tradition would be really expanded to allow far more pathways to practice.
I think the other thing that's really interesting in the new talent conversation is we're not only looking at new roles coming into the law firms, but we're getting a lot more clarity about what it means to be a successful attorney, and in that true attorney role, that it's about more than just being a great lawyer, and that there are different pathways to success, and how we as lawyers define our own role is getting much more discipline around that as we go forward.
Principle 5 was one that was certainly a cornerstone of Law 2023, and I suspect for many of you something that is well underway. Our study showed us that in the future, firms that would have winning propositions would have hyper specificity around market focus. So look to your own industry group initiatives, practice initiatives, key client initiatives. That sense of hyper-specificity requires firms to have sobriety, to be excellent at the things with which you have excellence, and not to dilute yourself or to have the delusion that a full-service platform could be sustained at all sizes of firms. Principle 6 is the recognition and the prediction in the year 2013. We predicted that firms would begin to embrace the same best practices of R&D functions. And let me say that not only are law firms investing pretty significantly in research and development committees or innovation councils or bringing in client advisory, we're beginning to see the R&D functions of law firms perform much like you would see in a consumer product company, where there's a tremendous amount of consumer or customer or client-based insights that are driving the design of new services and new offerings. I think one of the more progressive R&D initiatives is a law firm that we work with that has actually created a Skunk Works project, where they've invited clients in to really design, if we were going to invent a law firm that would put the current firm out of business, what would be true in the products and services and levels of engagement? How would we design that today in the name of the future? There's a tremendous amount of progression going and really embracing the best practices of R&D. Lastly is Principle 7. And again, in the year 2013, when we published the study, there was a high degree of momentum and recognition that by 2023, the utility of anthropological research would absolutely have to shape user experience, or client experience, as you would say. That we saw that was going to be a growing trend. And again, look to your own firms and ask yourself, how much more attention and energy could you be placing on those simple moments of truth? And candidly, what is innovative in the delivery of client experience to law firms on the surface may not seem shiny, may not seem particularly inventive, and may have absolutely nothing to do with technology. But our prediction has rung true that lawyers and law firms that are winning have recognized that we cannot miss the fundamentals of delivering excellent client service and client experience by managing expectations, running to a budget, no surprises billing, leveraging best practices of status and communication and project management, and putting a high degree of attention on client intimacy through gratitude and appreciation. So 7 principles to create a blueprint for the future, and Law 2023's predictions are already coming true.
Thanks, Deb. As we look at where does this, as we take these fundamentals around innovation and we think about where does that fit into the work that we're doing today, what we wanted to do is provide you some context about where the firms are getting it right. And as we look at the hallmarks of high-performing firms, how does innovation play into this? So the chart on your screen right now really highlights 6 things that we are seeing best-in-class law firms, those that are embracing great law principles, where they're doing work to get it right. On the far left of your screen are the 2 activities that have the most direct impact on your clients. So I would say the shortest line to have a direct impact on the way you're creating and delivering services for your clients. And the bottom bucket is just what Deb was talking about under design principle number 7, and that's this cultivation of client experience. When we are hyper vigilant and focused on how do we directly improve the day-to-day relationships with our clients, firms that are focusing on that are seeing success in spades. The second part of that is as we look at that broadened capacity, that principle number 4 around new talent, we're seeing the firms getting it right, get very focused on the fundamental skills that underlie what it takes to be a great business developer. We use the term doer-seller because we really want to recognize the fact that the role of the attorney has changed over time. The role of the attorney has never actually changed, but the emphasis on the selling side is to really recognize the fact that although we are not trained in the business development process in the way that we were trained in law school on the substantive aspects of it, our ability to get more grounding in those principles is making us more successful as lawyers. The middle bucket is about how do we move from that silo mentality into more collaborative groups of people. And that's where leadership and business development management comes into play. How do we align these individual successful things individuals are doing and coordinate them. And it's also about getting the tools and enabling our teams to be more successful. When I think about this piece of it, I think of it as the power of selling we over me. And if we can capture the collective insights and wisdom of our firm, that we're going to be more successful.
You know, as Deb's talking about this idea of a sales enablement tool as a real hallmark, I want you all to think about the word sales as it would be defined as an act of service. Because when we think about enablement, this doesn't just include some of the traditions that many of you may be exploring right now, like pipeline management or account planning, as it may be. But really, as you think about enabling the act of business development or the act of sales to really behave like an act of service, that's the kind of enablement that we're seeing activated in teams that drive a very strong correlation to high performance.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. And as we think about where we're seeing these things, the other thing you're raising in my mind is that the left-hand bucket, if you're on here and you're just as an individual lawyer thinking about how can I be more innovative and how can I be a better leader inside my organization, that left-hand side might be where you're playing. Where we see the leadership, business development management, and this idea of sales enablement tools play out is typically at a group level. So whether it's a practice group, a client team, or an industry group. And then on the far right side is where we get to how do we optimize our organizations? How do we lead and drive change across the collective group? And at the fundamental piece of that is getting very focused on our strategies. And then the second piece of that is innovation. And let me talk to you about what we see the difference in those things being. When we talk about strategic focus, it's about getting hyper vigilant about who it is we want to be and defining what success looks like. We think those triple bottom line metrics are a really great place to start and get grounded in your organization about what matters most. Once we've done that, we need to identify what our priorities and how can we execute on those priorities in a consistent way. One of the things in a lot of the strategy work that we do that we see is that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit there. There's a lot of things where we get to this place and we commit to the fact that if we just focused and committed to doing these things, we could improve a lot of things without fundamentally changing all that much of what we do as an organization. There's a second piece of that, and that's where the innovation bucket comes in. And that's where we start thinking about that what-if questions. We start thinking about possibilities and potential for solving problems, maybe solving problems we haven't been able to solve in the past, or maybe solving problems in a way that's better or different. So as we dive into what innovation means, what we'd like to set up for you are 3 different ways that you can start thinking about innovation. The first is core innovation. As Deb said earlier, core innovation is about innovating around your existing clients. It's about taking those best practices that already exist in your organization and making them a way of doing business across the organization. The second way of thinking about innovation is competitive innovation, and that's where we're thinking about how can we take the skills and capabilities inside our firm, shake them up, and put them together in a way that's going to allow us to create new markets or new services. And then the third way is that disruptive innovation. We see this with a lot of the new law firm models that are being created, and we see this with what we would call the breakout firms who are coming in. And that's where we say, if we know that we can better serve our clients by doing these things, and we could create new markets and services by doing these things, how should we be reorganizing our firm to accomplish those?
A key takeaway as you're thinking about engaging your constituents, your stakeholders in a conversation around innovation. Number one, it's important that you would take away that it begins around client experience, that the whole point of innovation is not shiny things for the sake of shiny things, but it is all about design thinking and really putting those Law 2023 principles into action by focusing absolutely and starting with the client. Secondly, you should know that roughly 70% of the ROI, at least in the near term, is going to come from activities that you engage in around core innovation. So you're going to see the best return on investment, the best payback of investment in energy by really streamlining that day-to-day, that moment of truth kind of innovation that you can provide right where you are. And lastly, when you begin to think about the shiny things and the desire to incorporate technology or utilize things like artificial intelligence, recognize that starting in a small and very discreet way to begin to gain momentum and to be able to have proofs of concept, that firms that look at disruption or competitive innovation with that mindfulness, you actually create the conditions for the culture to evolve with you instead of simply introducing a new app or putting something together that has a great PR splash. So these three things really make up a way of considering innovation beyond one simple word or one simple idea.
Great. So let's shift gears now. So these are a lot of founding principles, and hopefully they'll help you start thinking about what does this mean for your organization. We're going to shift gears and talk about some really practical ways. And if you do nothing today but leave here with a bit of a paradigm shift in the way that you're thinking about innovation, I think it will be incredibly helpful. What we have seen in with a lot of the conversation around innovation is that it's this big, giant, overwhelming thing that takes years and years and years to ever see a return on investment. That's true in technology, and it's true in some of the work that we're seeing. And what we're going to suggest is we don't want to wait that 10 years. We want to provide a way to get there quicker. And what we're seeing is the old model, which is, okay, let's hire an innovation person. Let's arm ourselves with all the people we need to get innovation in place. Let's build an infrastructure and a process and planning and do a lot of planning around how we're going to do it. And then let's get to the process of innovation. What we're suggesting is let's change that up. Let's find a way to get innovation in action quickly. Let's start by listening to our clients. Let's understand from them as they're thinking about future casting what their business looks like, what do we need to do to respond to that. Let's, based on that information, let's try some stuff. Let's pilot. Let's find a quick win. Let's create a prototype and try something out, and then let's go test it with our clients. And ultimately, as what we're thinking about, let's make sure that we find a way to better serve the way that everything that we're doing is in service to our clients. So as a setup for that, as we talk about what does that look like from an action plan, we think the first phase is to build your innovation blueprint. And what that means is whether you're starting at core, competitive, or disruptive, you want to ask yourself 3 questions. The first is, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? Right? So many times we see people dive into these bright, shiny objects and they get stuck there. What we need to know is there a need in the market? Is there a desire for what you do? The second thing you need to think about is, are we able to solve it in a meaningful way? And then the third thing we need to think about is this worth it? Is this something that, as we look to our clients, is it better, or is it going to make it better or different?
So as you see this particular rubric around innovation blueprint, this is a standard best practice. So again, if you want to elevate your credibility in this conversation, hallmark organizations, high-performing organizations across all verticals use this typical 3-step rubric and really identifying how to begin to build the innovation blueprint. Then we move into the next phase. And so for a lot of you, you're going to have to ask yourself, well, how am I going to get budget? How am I going to get all of my team on board with this? And how am I going to convince lawyers that may be a bit skeptical in order to get started? We've outlined a potential path for innovation, and we've mapped that back to those Law 2023 principles. So again, if you're just getting this process started, we encourage you begin with a triple bottom line approach, introducing the conversation of thinking more expansively of what success looks like. Not only does that tie back to design principle number 3, it allows access for all of the stakeholders inside of your firm and within the communities that you serve to get engaged around what great looks like. Then you can move into phase 2, which is all about that client experience. And as Deb's highlighted, that when you define innovation with the client experience in the middle, it then allows you to think about innovation from a core perspective that will set the condition for competitive and disruptive innovation over time. So again, one of the great ways to get adoption or engagement or buy-in is by beginning to examine how are we serving our clients in our best possible ways, and then how do we operationalize best practices in the service to our clients on a day-to-day as we're going approach. Phase 3 then will set the conditions for you to move back to the design principles 1 and 5, where you can begin to look at how do we look at technology and how do we start to think about the hyper-specificity of markets that we want to serve or could serve, and how does technology really enable that in a more meaningful way, which then allows you to move to phase 4, where you really begin to see an expanded view of what talent may look like, and ultimately how the R&D functions of your firm can really innovate to reinvent the practice and delivery of legal work. And then ultimately we see firms that are at the furthest edge of innovation are putting together productive product development for offerings that will transcend jurisdiction and frankly just reinvent the business model of law. The word of caution is don't start at phase 5 without laying the foundation of the prior phases, and realize that innovation really is not a linear process, it's a circular process, and firms will often engage within each of these phases multiple times across their journey.
Yeah, and I want to reinforce something else is as you look at what your potential path inside your organization, the 3 things at the bottom of the screen, this idea of innovating first within the current state, innovating to gain a competitive advantage, and then reinventing the practice of law, those stages are typically what's most successful for people. You may, inside your organization, there may be different design principles that come in at different phases, and that's really based on the needs that your organization has.
And then lastly is a phase 3, something that you could take away and how you might organize yourselves. Again, the old paradigm is like, well, we've got to go hire a bunch of people. We have to have people that are dedicated to doing R&D and leadership work. And in some firms, that absolutely makes sense as a starting point. And it may also form the foundation for R&D councils. We're also though seeing lower cost or easier to access opportunities by things like innovation tournaments, how you can assemble the voice of the client through client advisory boards, how you can begin to have an ideation kind of experience. We're seeing a number of law firms engage in Shark Tank-like activities through product design and product development. Many firms are recognizing that innovation is something that must be incubated, and so it is not just a one and done or design something and upload it as an app. But ultimately, product development labs require a level of culture readiness, and that must be inextricably linked to listening to clients first before we invent a bunch of shiny things.
So as we start to wrap up our content today, and you start to think about the path forward and how you can be part of the process of leading in innovation, we wanted to share with you some things that you might be able to take with you and leverage as superpowers as you look to advance the conversation inside your organization. Because ultimately, as we said earlier, this is really about your leadership, your ability to engage and motivate and unstick people who may have gotten stuck in terms of trying something new, different, or better. So the first, we would really, any opportunity that you have to share with your colleagues or with your firm leaders, any perspective about what others are doing that could trigger this fear of missing out or FOMO is always a great place to start. And you can sprinkle those in with different case studies. Deborah talked through the Principles of Law 2023 earlier. We'd encourage you to leverage that study and really look at some of the specific cases that are going on where people are getting it right. The second, Deb, I'm going to let you do this one because you do it so much better than anyone I know.
One of our favorite ways to start the superpower of innovation conversation is to leverage the technique called the Dream Out Loud. And so as you think about the key stakeholders that would need to engage, would need to give buy-in and actually control perhaps budget in your respective firms, let me just say this. A Dream Out Loud conversation always is a 3-part conversation, and it always creates a neutral to super positive outcome. So imagine if you were to start with first an authentic acknowledgement of the key leader or stakeholder by affirming their respect that you may have for them or a sense of honor that you may have. Tell them what your goal or dream is as a leader of or a piloting effort to lead or create something that would build some innovation into your opportunity, and then ask them for advice or input. People don't resist change, they resist being changed. And the Dream Out Loud superpower allows you to invite stakeholders into your conversations to give their point of view and to often choose to engage and support you and get their buy-in by using this technique. Incidentally, it also works as a Dream Out Loud for generating business, but that's a separate webinar. It's a great way to get people to engage in helping you with your business development too.
Yeah, and finally, a third way you might want to think about engaging in these clients is what we would call is a conversation with a gift. Provide something that's going to make your team new, different, or better. So as Rachel said earlier, she is going to be giving you the gift of this webinar recording. If that is something that anyone in your organization would find of interest, we'd encourage you to share it with people. Our goal is to really build this great law movement, and we want to get as many people engaged in that process as possible. The second is to really think about how might you put together an innovation brief that of insights about how you might help your leaders create that path forward. It's something that we do with a lot of our clients, and it can be very helpful to actually present a perspective on what it would look like to engage in that inside your organization. So think about how you might be doing that, and if there's anything that Deb or I can do to support that effort, please don't hesitate to reach out to us.
So Rachel, we're going to come back to our final quick poll, and then I believe we're going to transition to questions. So our final quick poll question is, when you think about creating growth optimization in your firm, what do you think is needed most? Because ultimately innovation is about growth optimization. So as you take a moment, please select one of the following responses. Are you needing more stickiness with your clients? Are you looking at new markets and service offerings that would really optimize growth in your firms? Are you at the stage where you've invested some of those foundation things and now you're ready to rethink the business model? Do all of these apply, or in cases has this just been one of the scenarios that really none of these are of interest? So again, take a quick moment to select one that is most connected to this idea of creating growth optimization in your firm.
Great. And I'll also remind you, if you do have questions for our Q&A portion, to go ahead and send those now. We'll be getting to them right after this. And I think we have a majority on this poll results here.
Well, I can say that it's not surprising, and I want to just leave you all in response to the poll where all of the above apply. Realize, and it's sequencing in the proper order. Begin with stickiness with existing clients. The single biggest piece of feedback we hear in our client research is how existing clients are now receptive or open to new offers simply because they don't feel like they're being invested or cared for or engaged with their existing law firms. In fact, 60 to 80% of existing legal business is up for grabs. And so as you're thinking about growth optimization, loving on those existing clients is a great place to start. I also love the idea that then once you've established some of that innovation with client experience and clients, is that you can begin to look at things that would fall on the continuum of more traditional innovation, like competitive innovation with markets and offerings, or certainly disruptive innovation as you rethink your business models as a whole.
Yeah, and just to reinforce the point that people don't like to be changed, when you really focus around stickiness with clients, there is absolutely zero opposition to any conversation inside a law firm, which is something that would allow us to do something better or more valuable to our clients. So when we're talking about how do we motivate and engage and not scare people that this is something overwhelming, you can't lose by starting there.
So I think now, Rachel, if you can, we're going to take a few questions. We're right at about 11 minutes until we conclude our session. Rachel, what do we have so far?
Great. Well, fire away. I know that we had talked a lot about how innovation is really a journey and where it fits into the work that we're doing, whether it's engaging individuals, activating teams, optimizing firms. So if you want to bring some of these concepts to a firm that has never thought about these things, where do you start? Do you start with that blueprint, phase one? Do you start with the FOMO tactic? Where do you start to start letting this idea to the rest of your firm?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I think we hear that conversation all the time is, where do you start? Deb, I'll let you give your perspective. My perspective is when you as a leader can provide evidence about what is working in other firms, and really present what you're trying to accomplish in the context of what we know to be true about what's working, and is a really safe place to start. And we usually use those hallmarks of the firms that are getting it right. It's a great way to do it. And yeah, FOMO works better than anything, because there is in law that great desire to know what other people are doing.
And I would say the second thing is I would use the 7 design principles that were founded in the Law 2023 study, largely because we've got 4 years of data that suggests that firms are engaging in legitimate innovation work against all 7 arenas. It's also a good standard because your firms undoubtedly are doing something right that will map back to one of those 7 things. And so this is also a very appreciative or positive-oriented way to drive change by giving the encouragement that we're not starting at ground zero, that we have evidence in our own efforts thus far that we're on the right track. So now why don't we approach success on purpose and with purpose versus in an incidental or a haphazard way.
And incidentally, I think it's going to be included in our follow-up materials, but because of the shortness of this seminar, we didn't have the opportunity to get into specific case studies, but there is an article we published on the Where We Are Now of Law 2023 in the ABA Journal this month, and it has some of those specific examples. And when you can use names and actual specific thingy things, that can be really helpful in those conversations.
Right. I think that's also a great point, Deb, about the Law 2023 study, that data can really create that burning platform to get buy-in within your organization. So given that point, who should be involved in the innovation initiative? Where do I start so I'm not just sitting on an island alone trying to move forward some of these principles?
So I want to spend a quick moment talking to the legal marketers and the professional development team members that are on this call. With no disrespect at all to the lawyers who've dialed in today, let me say this. If you are in legal marketing or business development, or you are a part of professional development, this is absolutely a lane or a channel of positive contribution to growth that your 2 functions can band together and can shepherd the introduction of this data and these insights to the larger community of your law firm leaders. So we absolutely encourage you to grab the reins. And the reason I'm so encouraging of this, as a good friend of ours, Jen Johnson-Scalzi, often says, is that there are 2 kinds of people in the world. We have revenue producers and we have revenue enablers. And let me be a real vote of confidence. The business development and marketers on this call, and those of you who may be in professional development or HR or talent, you are absolutely the revenue enablers of your law firm, and there is no better way to show evidence of revenue enablement like getting engaged around the conversation of innovation. Now, to the lawyers on this call, this is your shining moment to take the torch, to be a thought leader by engaging your team and your community in such a way that will introduce the what's possible or the what if. And so, again, I would say usually innovation happens best when you have people that are passionate, that are engaged, and have belief that something could be better.
Yeah, and I'm going to add to that, as you look at who should be in the room, diversity matters here. The last thing that we want in any innovation initiative is a group of people who all think exactly the same way. So my shout out is to the millennials on the call. These things that we're talking about today and where the law firm is going to be in the future, these are the things that are going to 100% have a direct impact on you. So we encourage you to raise your hands. And to the senior attorneys on the call, you have the wisdom. You have all of that insight and collective knowledge inside of you that if you take that with you and you don't share it with the people inside your firm, we're going to lose all of that great institutional work that we have. So I say bringing together, this is a great area where bringing together the generations and opening the door and not being afraid to have someone have a different perspective to you. And that adds value in so many different ways.
If any of you are familiar with Dan Pink's great work in his book Drive, he often refers to this idea that we have baby boomers and we have echo boomers, and there's nothing like great law to bring the common interest of both parties, because cause and good purpose are at the center of what baby boomers are caring about and what millennials or echo boomers are caring about. So this is, as Deb Baker highlighted, this is a great space of tremendous alignment for that subject.
Finding a common interest is always a good place to start. And I think sometimes there might be some concern when you're trying to bring on a new initiative and something that's innovative and different, that it's too much too soon. But I think what you both outlined in the webinar is that phased approach can really help people not bite off more than they can chew.
Indeed, indeed.
So our next question, and this is, you knew this one was coming, money talk. So what type of investment is required to put these concepts to action? How do I put a number around innovation and what it's going to cost my firm to get started on that journey?
So it's a really interesting question and absolutely not a surprise. I think if you look at some of the data that we've seen this year about where firm investments are going, the firms that are getting it right, the highest percentage of investment, and I'm talking about it in percentages because dollar values aren't going to matter. It's all going to be dependent on the size of your organization. But the percentage of investment that's if you take as an example, a marketing budget right now, the firms that are really getting it right, 39% of their marketing budgets are being invested in client development. And if this is not, as we think about what does innovation ultimately mean, that's a really great framework for thinking about a percentage of a budget that you would want to put into place. The equally important thing I would raise here is that when you're thinking about how to invest in, when you're thinking about an investment in something new or different, think about it in the context of 3-to-1 investment leverage. How can we take existing things that are going on in the firm right now and be additive to it? For example, if you are a firm that is investing in client feedback interviews with your clients, there is no better way to get an innovation and to leverage, to start doing innovation, is to think about how are you using those conversations as a way to collect insight about future casting and what the future of their business looks like. So it may not be any new investment, it might be a new type of question, which is, here's, a typical one feedback question might be, help us understand how we're doing in the context of your business, help us understand what other challenges that you have. But how about a question that says, as you're looking to stay competitive in your business and in your industry, what are the challenges or opportunities that you are seeing that will require you to be successful 10 years from now?
Deb's input really points to one of the famous quotes that Henry Ford had, is that he said, if I asked my customers what they needed, they would have said faster horses. And so as you're contemplating the kinds of investments that you can make, leveraging things like client feedback, instead of asking your clients to say what it is that they need, ask those questions about what it is they're trying to achieve. And based on what your clients are trying to achieve, can drive a lot more leverage of the investments that you're already making, because you align your products and services to help your clients get from where they are to where they're going, and not put the reliance on them to invent, if you will, the next pricing strategy or the next technology or the utility of some other kind of service.
Yeah, and do a gut check with yourself on what the types of investments that you are. If you go back to that slide about the 3 questions that you should be asking, make sure we're solving a problem. I think one of the traps that we've seen firms fall into is this investment in a thing, this bright shiny objects, whether it's a piece of technology or it's something else. And we build it and think the clients will come before we first identified for what great purpose is this bright shiny object and be valuable. And so if you're looking for PR, if you're looking for a quick headline, that might, you might get that, but are you fundamentally going to improve your business? But make sure you're answering that question as well.
Great. Thank you, guys. Thank you for your time today. Thank you to all of you for joining this webinar. Deb Knupp, Deborah Baker, thanks for your insights. I know that the audience got a lot of value about what you had to share. And we will also be sending you the recordings as well as the slides, so please watch your email for those. And I'll give a quick plug. This is the second webinar in our Great Law series. You can find the first webinar on GrowthPlay's YouTube channel. You can find that at youtube.com/GrowthPlay. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.